The fluorescent lights in Seattle General Hospital's intensive care unit hummed with a frequency that made Elena Carvalho's head ache. She'd been sitting in the uncomfortable vinyl chair beside her mother's bed for 18 hours straight, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, counting each beep of the heart monitor like a prayer. Her mother, Maria Carvalho, 67 years old, lay motionless after suffering a massive stroke the previous morning. The doctors said the next 48 hours were critical. Elena had called everyone, her husband Josh, her 2 teenage daughters, her mother's friends from the gardening club. But the first person to arrive, sweeping into the ICU like she owned the place, was Aunt Patricia. Patricia Carvalho Henderson was Maria's younger sister by 5 years, though she'd spent a lifetime acting like the elder. She was 62, impeccably dressed, even at 7 in the morning, in an Italian wool coat and heels that clicked authoritatively on the linoleum. Her highlighted blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was attending a board meeting, not visiting her sister in critical condition. "Elena." Patricia's voice was crisp, controlled. "How is she?" "The same. They're monitoring her closely. The neurologist said there's significant damage to the left hemisphere, but they won't know the full extent until she wakes up. If she wakes up." Elena's voice cracked on the last words. Patricia moved to the other side of the bed, studying Maria's face with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Not grief, exactly. Something more complicated. "You should go home," Patricia said after a moment. "Shower. Rest. I'll stay with her." "I'm not leaving." "Elena, you look terrible." "When's the last time you ate?" Elena couldn't remember. Time had become fluid since the phone call from the neighbor who'd found her mother collapsed in her garden, cell phone still in her hand. She'd been trying to call Elena. That detail haunted her. Her mother's last conscious act had been reaching out for her daughter. "I'll eat later. I need to be here when she wakes up." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. Always so stubborn. Just like Maria. She said it like it wasn't a compliment. They sat in tense silence for several minutes. Elena held her mother's hand, careful of the IV line, studying the familiar features now slack with unconsciousness. Her mother's hair, once jet black like Elena's, had gone completely silver years ago. She wore it long, usually in a braid. Elena had taken it out when the nurses first admitted her, spreading it across the pillow. It seemed important somehow, keeping that small dignity. The door opened and Dr. Patel entered, a young neurologist with kind eyes and steady hands. She'd been the one to explain the stroke to Elena in careful detail, drawing diagrams, answering her frantic questions with patience. "Ms. Carvalho, Mrs. Henderson." She nodded to both of them. "I'm here to check on Maria's neurological responses. Fair warning, this might be difficult to watch, but it's necessary." She performed a series of tests, checking reflexes, shining lights in Maria's eyes, pressing on her sternum to test pain response. Elena watched anxiously for any sign of awareness, any flicker of recognition. There was nothing. "Her pupils are reactive," Dr. Patel noted, making marks on her tablet. "That's a good sign. Brain swelling is stable. We're still waiting to see if she'll regain consciousness on her own." "And if she doesn't?" Patricia asked the question Elena couldn't bring herself to voice. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we continue supportive care and monitoring." She smiled gently at Elena. "Keep talking to her. There's evidence that familiar voices can help." After she left, Elena resumed her vigil, telling her mother about the girls, about Josh, about trivial things from her day before the world had stopped. Patricia sat stiffly in the corner, checking her phone periodically. More family arrived as the morning progressed. Uncle Robert, Maria's oldest brother, a retired accountant who still wore suits everywhere. His wife, Aunt Carmen, who immediately started crying and had to be comforted by the nurses. Elena's cousin David, Robert's son, who worked in finance in San Francisco and had driven through the night. They crowded into the small ICU room despite the two-visitor rule, the nurses making exceptions for the circumstances. Elena felt suffocated by their presence, by the hushed conversations, by the way they kept looking at her mother like she was already gone. It was Uncle Robert who first brought up the practical matters. "Has anyone contacted Maria's lawyer? There are things we need to know about her will, her wishes for medical care." "It's too early for that," Elena said sharply. "She's going to wake up." "Of course she is, dear," Aunt Carmen said in that tone that meant she didn't believe it at all. "But Robert's right. We should be prepared." "I have power of attorney," Elena said. "Mom made sure of that years ago. I'll handle everything she needs." Patricia's head snapped up from her phone. "Power of attorney? Since when?" "Since she updated her estate planning 5 years ago, after Dad died. She never mentioned it to me." "Why would she need to?" Eleanor couldn't keep the edge from her voice. She'd never understood the dynamic between her mother and Patricia. They'd been close as girls, according to family stories, but something had fractured that relationship decades ago. Her mother never spoke about it. Patricia's expression hardened. "Because I'm her sister, her blood family, not—" She stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air. "Not what?" Eleanor demanded. The tension in the room became suffocating. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "Let's not do this here. Maria needs peace." But Patricia wasn't finished. She stood walking to the foot of the bed, her hands gripping the rail. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the small room. "Elena, you need to understand something. You're not really family, not blood family. You don't have the right to make decisions about Maria's care." The words landed like physical blows. Elena heard them, understood them individually, but couldn't process their meaning when strung together. The room went utterly silent, except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. "What are you talking about?" Elena's voice came out as a whisper. "You're not Maria's biological daughter. She never gave birth to you. You were adopted when you were 3 days old." Elena's vision blurred. She gripped the chair arm to steady herself. "That's not true. You're lying." "I'm not. Maria got pregnant when she was 23, but she lost the baby at 8 months, stillborn, a daughter. She was devastated, fell into such a deep depression we thought we'd lose her too." "Stop," Elena said. But Patricia continued. "Your father, Roberto, arranged the adoption, a private adoption through someone he knew, a young woman from Mexico, just 17, pregnant and desperate. 3 days after you were born, Maria and Roberto brought you home. They told everyone Maria had been pregnant, that you were theirs. Only a few of us knew the truth." Elena couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. She looked at Uncle Robert, at Aunt Carmen, seeking denial in their faces. She found only uncomfortable confirmation. "This is why you shouldn't have power of attorney," Patricia said. "You're not actually her child. Not really. The family should be making decisions about Maria's care, not someone who—" "That's quite enough." The new voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone turned to see Dr. Patel standing in the doorway, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood an older man in a white coat, late 60s, with silver hair and an air of quiet authority. Dr. James Morrison, according to his badge, Chief of Neurology. "Mrs. Henderson, you need to leave," Dr. Morrison said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Now." "Excuse me," Patricia drew herself up to her full height. "I'm visiting my sister. You're creating a disturbance in my ICU and causing distress to a patient's primary caregiver. That ends now. Security will escort you out if necessary." Patricia's face flushed. "You can't." "I absolutely can. This is my unit. Miss Carvalho has legal authority to make decisions for her mother. and I won't have you undermining that or attacking her at her mother's bedside. Leave. Take your relatives with you if they can't behave." For a moment, Patricia looked like she might argue further. Then she grabbed her designer bag and stalked toward the door. She paused next to Eleanor, leaning down to whisper, "This isn't over. You're not family, no matter what papers Maria signed." After Patricia, Robert, Carmen and David were ushered out by security, Dr. Morrison pulled a chair next to Elena. "I apologize that you had to experience that. Family dynamics during medical crises can be challenging." Elena couldn't speak. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Patel handed her tissues. "The things your aunt said," Dr. Morrison continued carefully, "I don't know if they're true or not, but I do know this. You've been here since your mother was admitted. You've held her hand, talked to her, advocated for her care. That's what makes you her daughter. Not biology, not genetics. Love and presence." "But what if it's true?" Eleanor finally managed. If she's not?" "Then it doesn't change anything that matters," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "You're still the person she chose to have power of attorney. You're still the person she wanted making decisions for her. You're still her daughter in every way that counts." Dr. Patel nodded. "I've seen a lot of families in crisis. Trust me, being related by blood doesn't guarantee that people will show up. You're here. That's what matters." They left her alone then, and Eleanor turned back to her mother's still face. She studied it, looking for signs of herself, or the absence of them. Her own eyes were darker than her mother's, her nose different, her face shape, but she'd always assumed she favored her father's side. Had she been blind? Had she missed obvious signs her whole life? She thought about her childhood, searching for clues, inconsistencies. There were none that she could remember. She had baby photos, though come to think of it, none from the hospital. Her birth certificate listed Maria and Roberto Carvalho as her parents. She'd never had reason to question it. Her phone buzzed. "Josh, how's Mom? Girls asking about her. When should we come?" Elena stared at the text, unable to formulate a response. How could she explain what just happened? She couldn't even process it herself. Instead, she squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, if you can hear me, I need you to wake up. I need you to tell me the truth, please." The monitor continued its steady beep. Her mother's face remained peaceful, unaware of the bomb Patricia had just detonated. Elena stayed through the afternoon and into the evening. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, offering Elena food and water she couldn't stomach. Dr. Patel checked in twice more, her presence calming. Around 8 p.m., as darkness fell outside the window, something changed. Elena noticed it first in the monitor, a slight irregularity in the heartbeat pattern. Then her mother's fingers twitched, once, twice. "Mom?" Elena leaned forward. "Mom, can you hear me?" Another twitch. Then her mother's eyes moved beneath her closed lids. Elena hit the call button. "She's moving! My mother's moving!" Nurses rushed in, followed quickly by Dr. Patel. They surrounded the bed, checking responses, calling Maria's name, asking her to squeeze their hands if she could hear them. And slowly, miraculously, Maria Carvalho's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused at first, confused, trying to make sense of the lights and faces hovering over her. But then they found Elena. And despite the stroke, despite the brain damage, despite everything, something flickered there. Recognition. Love. Maria's mouth moved. No sound came out. The stroke had affected her speech, but Elena could read her lips. "Elena, mi hija." Elena broke down completely, sobbing, holding her mother's hand to her face. "I'm here, Mom. I'm right here." The medical team worked efficiently, checking Maria's neurological responses now that she was conscious. She could move her right side, but not her left. She couldn't speak, though she could make sounds. Her eyes tracked movement and recognized faces. It was better than anyone had hoped. When they finally left Eleanor and Maria alone, Eleanor faced the question she'd been terrified to ask, but knew she had to. Mom. She had to stop, gather courage. Aunt Patricia came today. She said something. She said, "I'm not your biological daughter, that you adopted me." Maria's eyes filled with tears immediately. She made a sound, frustrated, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Her right hand squeezed Elena's desperately. "Is it true?" Elena whispered. Maria nodded. Once, definitively. Then she did something that would stay with Elena forever. She brought Elena's hand to her chest, over her heart, and held it there. Her eyes were fierce, insistent. The message was clear. Biology doesn't matter. You're mine, you're my daughter, you're my heart. Elena collapsed onto the bedrail, crying harder. "I don't care. I don't care if we're not related by blood. You're my mother. You'll always be my mother." Maria's tears matched her own. Mother and daughter, chosen if not born together, holding on to each other as the machines beeped and the hospital hummed around them. Outside the ICU, Patricia Carvalho Henderson sat in her Mercedes in the parking garage, gripping the steering wheel. She made a phone call. "It's done," she said when someone answered. "I told her. Maria's awake now, but the damage is done. Elena knows she's not really family. Now we move to phase 2, contesting the power of attorney. I want access to Maria's accounts and I want control of her care. That girl has no business making decisions." The voice on the other end said something Patricia didn't like. Her face hardened. "I don't care what the doctors say. Maria is my sister, my blood, and I won't let some adopted stranger inherit everything our parents built. We do this my way, or I'll find people who will help me." She hung up and stared at the hospital building, its lit windows like eyes judging her. But Patricia had never cared much for judgment. She cared about money, about control, about what she believed was rightfully hers, and she always got what she wanted. Always. Chapter 2. The morning after Maria regained consciousness, Seattle General Hospital became a battlefield. Patricia arrived at 7 a.m. with an attorney, Bradford Pierce, from one of Seattle's most aggressive law firms, the kind that handled hostile takeovers and bitter divorces. Eleanor had spent the night in her mother's ICU room, dozing in the chair, waking every time a nurse checked vitals. She was disheveled, exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline. When Patricia swept in with Pierce trailing behind, Elena's first instinct was to call security. "You're not supposed to be here," Eleanor said, standing between them and her mother's bed. "Dr. Morrison banned you." "Dr. Morrison has no authority over who visits a patient," Pierce said smoothly. He was 50-something, with silver temples and an expensive suit. "Mrs. Henderson has every right to see her sister. Not when it upsets the patient." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "Get out." "We're not here to upset anyone," Patricia said, her voice saccharine. "We're here to discuss Maria's care, specifically her long-term care needs and who's qualified to make those decisions." "I'm qualified. I have power of attorney." "A power of attorney that may not be valid," Pierce interjected, "given that there are questions about whether proper disclosure was made regarding family relationships when that document was signed." Eleanor stared at him. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means that if Maria didn't inform you that you were adopted when she granted you power of attorney, she may have been operating under false pretenses. Specifically, the assumption that biological family relationships create different obligations and considerations than adoptive ones. That's insane. Adoption is legally the same as biological parenthood. In some contexts, yes. But estate law is complex, particularly when it comes to contesting documents based on undue influence or lack of full disclosure." Patricia moved closer. "Elena, this doesn't have to be a fight. We're family." "Are we?" Because yesterday you told me I'm not really family. You can't have it both ways. I said you're not her biological child. That's a fact, not an attack. But you're right. We are family in the broader sense, which is why I think we should work together on Maria's care. Make decisions collectively. Elena looked at her mother. Maria was awake, watching the exchange with distress evident despite her limited mobility. Her right hand moved weakly, trying to reach for Elena. "Mom doesn't want you here," Elena said. "Look at her. You're upsetting her." "She's had a stroke," Patricia said dismissively. "She's confused, medicated. She doesn't know what she wants right now. That's exactly why decisions shouldn't rest solely with you." Before Elena could respond, the door opened. Dr. Morrison entered, and his expression when he saw Patricia and Pierce went from professional to glacial. "I believe I made myself clear yesterday, Mrs. Henderson. You're not welcome in this unit." "Dr. Morrison," Pierce stepped forward. "I'm Bradford Pierce, representing Margaret Henderson. We're here to discuss Maria Carvalho's care. My client has concerns about whether appropriate decision-making processes are being followed." "Your client's concerns are noted and irrelevant. Ms. Carvalho has full legal authority as power of attorney for healthcare. That authority was properly executed and is entirely valid. Unless you have a court order stating otherwise, you need to leave." "We'll have one by end of day," Pierce said confidently. "We're filing an emergency petition this morning to contest the power of attorney and request a temporary guardian be appointed pending review." Elena's stomach dropped. "You're suing me?" "We're protecting Maria's interests," Patricia said. "Someone has to. Get out." Dr. Morrison's voice was hard as steel. "Now, or I'll have you escorted by police, not just security. You're disrupting patient care and I won't tolerate it." Patricia and Pierce exchanged glances. Then Pierce handed Elena a business card. "You'll want to retain counsel. The hearing is scheduled for 3 p.m. today. Family Court, Judge Catherine Bradford presiding." They left. Elena stood frozen, the business card trembling in her hand. "This can't be happening," she whispered. Dr. Morrison sighed. "I'm afraid it is. This is unfortunately not uncommon when there's money or property involved. Do you know anything about your mother's assets?" Elena shook her head numbly. "She owns her house. She has savings, I think. We never discuss finances. She's only 67. We never thought about this stuff." "You need a lawyer. Immediately." "Do you have someone you can call?" "My husband's cousin is an attorney, family law. I'll call her." She did, right there from the ICU. Jessica Morales answered on the second ring, listened to Eleanor's rushed explanation, and said she'd meet her at the courthouse at 2:30. The next few hours passed in a blur. Elena called Josh, who immediately left work to come to the hospital. She called her daughters, told them Grandma was awake, but there were complications. She couldn't bring herself to explain the adoption revelation or the lawsuit. Not yet. She spent time with her mother, who grew increasingly agitated as the morning progressed. Maria couldn't speak, but her eyes were eloquent. She kept trying to tell Elena something, getting frustrated when the words wouldn't form. "It's okay, Mom," Elena kept saying, though nothing was okay. "Just rest. I'll handle this." But Maria shook her head violently, tears streaming. She grabbed Elena's hand, pulled her close, and forced out sounds that weren't quite words, but were laden with urgency and desperation. "She's trying to tell you something," the nurse, a middle-aged woman named Rita, observed. "After a stroke, sometimes patients can write even when they can't speak. Has anyone tried that?" Elena grabbed a notepad and pen from the bedside table. She pressed the pen into her mother's right hand. Maria's fingers were weak, clumsy, but she managed to scratch out letters. Kaja Elena frowned. "Box? You have a box?" Maria nodded frantically. She tried to write more, but exhaustion was taking over. "Banco." "You have a box at the bank? A safe deposit box?" Another emphatic nod. Maria tried to write more, but her hand was shaking too much. "That's enough," Rita said gently. "She needs to rest. Too much stress isn't good for stroke recovery." "Just one more thing, Mum. What's in the safe deposit box?" Maria's eyes were beginning to close, but she forced out one more sound. It took Elena a moment to understand. "Truth?" The smallest nod. Then Maria's eyes closed and she slipped into exhausted sleep. The emergency hearing at Seattle Family Court started exactly at 3 p.m. The courtroom was smaller than Elena expected, nothing like TV courtrooms. Judge Catherine Bradford was a stern woman in her 50s, with reading glasses perched on her nose and zero patience for nonsense, according to Jessica's whispered assessment. Patricia sat at the plaintiff's table with Bradford Pierce and another attorney Elena didn't recognize. She'd changed into a black dress suit and pearls, looking every inch the concerned sister. Elena and Jessica sat at the defendant's table. Jessica had spent the previous hour going over the case, reviewing the power of attorney document, preparing Elena for questions. "This should be straightforward," Jessica had said. "The power of attorney is ironclad. They don't have grounds. But be prepared. They're going to try to make you look unfit or suspicious. Don't take the bait. Answer honestly and calmly." Judge Bradford called the court to order. Pierce stood to present his case. "Your Honor, this emergency petition concerns Maria Carvalho, currently hospitalized at Seattle General following a severe stroke. My client, Patricia Henderson, is Ms. Carvalho's sister and closest biological relative. We're here because there are serious questions about whether the current power of attorney holder, Elena Carvalho, should continue in that role." "On what grounds?" Judge Bradford asked. "Several, Your Honor. First, Ms. Elena Carvalho is not Maria Carvalho's biological daughter. She's adopted. This wasn't disclosed when the power of attorney was executed, which raises questions about undue influence and whether Maria Carvalho would have made the same decision had full family relationships been transparent. Adoption creates the same legal parent-child relationship as biology," Judge Bradford said flatly. "You know that, Counselor." "Of course, Your Honor. But the second issue is more concerning. We have reason to believe that Elena Carvalho has been estranged from Maria Carvalho for several years, that their relationship has been distant, and that Maria may have been pressured into signing documents that don't reflect her current wishes." Elena started to object, but Jessica put a hand on her arm. "Third, there are significant assets at stake. Maria Carvalho owns property worth approximately $1.2 million, has savings and investments totaling nearly $800,000, and life insurance policies worth another $500,000. Elena Carvalho stands to inherit most or all of this. Given the circumstances, we believe a neutral third party should be appointed as temporary guardian pending a full investigation." "Ms. Morales?" Judge Bradford turned to Jessica. "Response?" Jessica stood. "Your Honor, this is a transparently frivolous attempt by my client's aunt to gain control of her sister's assets. The power of attorney was properly executed 5 years ago by attorneys at Morrison & Associates, one of Seattle's most respected firms. It explicitly names Elena Carvalho as healthcare and financial decision-maker. There was no requirement to disclose that Elena was adopted because it's legally irrelevant. She is Maria Carvalho's daughter in every legal sense. As for the allegation of estrangement in their relationship, that's demonstrably false. Elena has been at her mother's bedside continuously since the stroke. She's the person Maria Carvalho wanted making decisions, as evidenced by the legal documents she chose to execute. Patricia Henderson, by contrast, was banned from the ICU yesterday for creating a disturbance and has now weaponized her sister's medical crisis in an apparent attempt to gain access to her finances. Pierce stood. Your Honor, if I may, you may not. I haven't finished, Judge Bradford said coolly. She reviewed the documents in front of her. I see here that Maria Carvalho regained consciousness last night. Has she been able to communicate at all regarding her wishes? She has limited communication, Jessica said. The stroke affected her speech, but she's been able to use gestures and has shown clear preference for having Elena make decisions. That's not the same as competent consent, Pierce argued. She's medicated, confused, dealing with brain trauma. She can't meaningfully participate in these decisions right now. Which is exactly why power of attorney documents exist, Judge Bradford said. They're created when people are competent precisely for situations when they're not. She closed the file in front of her. Here's what we're going to do. I'm ordering a temporary guardian ad litem to be appointed, not to replace Elena Carvalho, but to investigate and report back to this court. The guardian will interview hospital staff, review Maria Carvalho's care, assess the family dynamics, and provide recommendations. Elena Carvalho retains power of attorney pending that investigation. Hearing is continued for 14 days. Pierce started to object, but Judge Bradford cut him off. That's my ruling, Counselor. You can appeal if you like, but I don't recommend it. This court doesn't look kindly on family members who weaponize medical crises for financial gain. If that's what's happening here, there will be consequences. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, Pierce said stiffly. As they filed out of the courtroom, Patricia grabbed Elena's arm. This isn't over. Let go of me. You think you've won. You think because you spent 33 years playing dress-up as Maria's daughter that you actually are one. You're not. You're a stranger she took pity on. And when Maria dies, and she will die, strokes like this don't end well. You'll get nothing, I'll make sure of that. Elena jerked her arm free. Is that what this is about? Money? Mom is lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life, and all you care about is money. I care about what's rightfully mine. What our parents built, what should stay in the family, real family. I am real family, Elena said, her voice breaking. I'm more family than you've ever been. When was the last time you visited Mom? Called her? Remembered her birthday? I was there. I'm always there. That's what makes family, not DNA. She walked away before Patricia could respond, Jessica beside her. In the hospital parking garage, Elena finally broke down. Jessica held her while she sobbed, all the fear and exhaustion and betrayal pouring out. We need to get into that safe deposit box, Jessica said when Elena could breathe again. Whatever your mother wants you to know, it's there. Do you have access? I don't know. I've never even been to her bank. I don't know which bank it is. We'll figure it out. Your power of attorney should give you access to her accounts. We'll start there. They went to Bank of America first, the branch closest to Maria's house. The manager, a sympathetic woman named Patricia, reviewed Elena's power of attorney documents and confirmed Maria had accounts there, including a safe deposit box. I can give you access, Patricia said, but I'll need to verify with our legal department first, given the circumstances you've described. Can you give me until tomorrow? Elena agreed, though every instinct screamed at her to demand access now. Whatever her mother wanted her to know, Patricia was probably trying to get to it first. That night, Elena returned to the hospital to find her mother significantly more alert. The speech therapist had been working with her, and while Maria still couldn't form clear words, she could make more sounds, and her yes-no responses were definitive. Mom, Elena said, pulling a chair close. I went to court today. Aunt Patricia is trying to take away my power of attorney. She says I don't have the right to make decisions for you because I'm adopted. Maria's face contorted with rage. She made sounds that were clearly curses, her right hand slapping the bedrail. The judge appointed someone to investigate, but for now, I'm still in charge. We're going to the bank tomorrow to access your safe deposit box. Is that what you want? An emphatic nod. "What's in there, Mom? What's so important?" Maria grabbed the notepad again. It took several minutes, but she managed to write 3 words. "Tu verdadera madre." Elena's world tilted again. "What?" Maria pointed to the words, then at Elena, her expression desperate. She wrote more, even slower. "Patricia Mintio." "About what? Mom, what did Patricia lie about?" But Maria was exhausted, her hand falling limply. The nurse came in, gave her medication, and within minutes she was asleep again. Elena sat stunned, staring at the notepad. "Your real mother." Patricia lied. What did that mean? The next morning, Elena met Jessica at Bank of America. Patricia had gotten approval and led them to the vault. She unlocked Maria's safe deposit box and left them in a private room. Inside the metal box were documents, birth certificates, legal papers, letters, and photographs. Elena picked up the top photograph with shaking hands. It showed a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair and features that looked familiar. She was holding a newborn baby. The woman was smiling, but there were tears on her cheeks. Elena flipped it over, written on the back in faded ink, "Patricia Carvalho con bebé Elena, Abril 18, 1992, el día más difícil de mi vida." "Oh my God," Jessica breathed, looking over Elena's shoulder. There were more photos. Patricia, much younger, visibly pregnant. Patricia in a hospital bed holding a newborn. Patricia crying while an older couple, Elena recognized Maria and Roberto, held the baby. Elena picked up a legal document. A private adoption agreement dated April 1992. Birth mother, Patricia Carvalho. Adoptive parents, Maria Carvalho and Roberto Carvalho. "Patricia is my mother," Elena whispered. "Not Maria, Patricia." Jessica was reading another document. "There's more. Look at this." It was a letter dated April 1992 in Patricia's handwriting. "Maria, I know you'll take care of her better than I ever could. I'm not ready to be a mother. I have plans, ambitions, a life I want to live. And she deserves more than I can give her. But you need to promise me something. Promise you'll never tell her the truth. As far as Elena knows, you're her mother and I'm her aunt. That's how it has to be. I don't want her looking at me someday and asking why I gave her away. I don't want to be reminded of this mistake every time I see her. I'm doing this for both of us. You get the daughter you lost. I get my freedom. Everyone wins. Destroy this letter after you read it." "I mean it, Maria. Destroy everything. We never speak of this again." Patricia. But Maria hadn't destroyed it. She'd kept everything. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence. There were more letters in the box. Letters from Patricia over the years, mostly demanding money. 15,000 in 1995 to start her business, 20,000 in 2001 for her husband's medical bills, 50,000 in 2010 when her husband left her. Each letter had a veiled threat. If Maria didn't help, Patricia would tell Elena the truth. "She's been blackmailing your mother for 33 years, Jessica said quietly, "threatening to tell you that she's your biological mother unless Maria paid her." Elena felt numb. Her entire life was a lie. Not the lie she thought. Maria wasn't her adoptive mother who'd kept the secret. Maria was her adoptive mother who'd been forced to keep the secret to protect Elena from the truth. That her biological mother was a narcissist who'd abandoned her, then spent decades extorting the woman who'd saved her. At the bottom of the box was one more document, Maria's will updated just 6 months ago. It left everything to Elena with an explicit statement that Patricia Carvalho Henderson was to receive nothing, and a letter sealed, addressed to Elena. Elena opened it with shaking hands. "Mi querida Elena, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, and you've found the truth I tried to protect you from. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you so many times, but Patricia's threats kept me silent. She said if you knew it would destroy you. Maybe she was right. Maybe she was just manipulating me. I'll never know. Here's what you need to understand. I am your mother. Not because I gave birth to you, but because I chose you every single day for 33 years. I changed your diapers and stayed up through your fevers and taught you to read and held you when your first boyfriend broke your heart. I walked you down the aisle at your wedding and cried with joy when you had Sophia and Isabella. Patricia gave birth to you, but she was never your mother. She gave you away like you were an inconvenience and never looked back. The only time she's shown interest in you is when she wanted money from me. I've left everything to you, not just because I love you, but because you deserve it. Patricia deserves nothing. Don't let her guilt or manipulate you. Don't let her claim some biological bond means she gets to be part of your life now. You are my daughter, my real daughter, my chosen daughter, and I would choose you again 1,000 times over. I love you more than words can express. Mom Eleanor read it 3 times before she could speak. Jessica sat beside her, quietly supportive. What do I do? Eleanor finally asked. We go back to court, Jessica said firmly. We show the judge everything, the letters, the blackmail, Patricia's pattern of financial exploitation. This changes everything. The emergency hearing reconvened 2 days later. This time, Elena had ammunition. Jessica presented the contents of the safe deposit box methodically. The birth record showing Patricia was Elena's biological mother. The adoption papers. The letters showing Patricia had demanded money for 33 years under threat of revealing the truth. Maria's will explicitly disinheriting Patricia. Your Honor, Jessica said, this isn't about whether Elena is qualified to make decisions for Maria Carvalho. This is about Patricia Henderson trying to gain access to her sister's estate, an estate she believes she's entitled to, despite decades of extortion and abandonment of her biological daughter. Pierce tried to salvage the situation. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that she made poor decisions as a young woman, but that doesn't change the fact that she's Maria Carvalho's closest blood relative. Stop right there, Judge Bradford interrupted. I've heard enough. Ms. Henderson, stand up. Patricia stood reluctantly. You gave up your daughter. Then you spent 3 decades extorting money from your sister under threat of telling that daughter the truth. Now that your sister is incapacitated, you see an opportunity to claim assets you believe should be yours. Is that accurate? Your Honor, Yes or no? A long pause. Then, the situation is more complicated. Yes or no? Another pause. Yes. Judge Bradford's expression was disgusted. Here's my ruling. Elena Carvalho retains full power of attorney for healthcare and financial matters for Maria Carvalho. Patricia Henderson is barred from contact with Maria Carvalho or Elena Carvalho except through counsel. If Ms. Henderson attempts to contest Maria Carvalho's will after her death, and I note that I hope that death is many years away, this court's findings today will be submitted as evidence of her character and motives. She leaned forward. Ms. Henderson, you are one of the most selfish, manipulative people I've had the misfortune to see in my courtroom. You abandoned your child, extorted your sister, and are now trying to profit from that sister's medical crisis. You disgust me. Get out of my courtroom. Patricia fled, Pierce hurrying after her. Elena sat stunned. That went well, Jessica said with a small smile. 2 weeks later, Maria was transferred from ICU to a rehabilitation facility. Her speech was slowly returning, though she'd never fully recover. She could walk with assistance. Her mind was sharp. On Elena's first visit to the rehab facility, Maria took her daughter's hand and said, slowly but clearly, Te amo, mi hija. I love you too, Mom, Elena said, and she meant it, because she'd learned that family wasn't about biology. It was about choice, about showing up, about love demonstrated day after day, year after year. Patricia had given birth to her. But Maria had been her mother, and nothing, not DNA, not court cases, not cruel revelations, could change that truth. 6 months later, Maria was well enough to move into Elena's house. She needed care, but she was alive, present, still Elena's mother in every way that mattered. They never heard from Patricia again. She'd moved to Arizona, according to mutual acquaintances. Started over somewhere, no one knew her history. Sometimes Elena wondered if she should feel something about her biological mother. Anger, maybe, or grief for what could have been. But mostly, she felt nothing. Patricia was a stranger who'd contributed genetic material. Maria was her mother. And that was all the family Elena needed.